just as much as we're going to call out the anti-Semitism, we're also, as Jews, going to call out our own side when we go too far. And I mean, I am sick and tired of the way that Jewish people have kind of kissed Donald Trump's ring for all of the shiny toys he's handing Israel at the consequence of our long-term safety and security.
From the president who said no more wars.
Welcome back to another episode of Concepts of a Pod, and as we're recording this, we are celebrating the 2-year anniversary of the day we sent 60,000 people a text message pretending to be Selena Meyer's campaign from Veep, having forgotten to send their EOQ fundraising texts. And we are so grateful for everyone who has stuck with us since, as we've embarked on this journey to fix the democratic digital ecosystem and make it more responsive to the voices of supporters like you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us. We know it was an April Fool's joke 2 years ago, but little did we know that it would actually turn into something as big as it is today.
We knew. Don't sell us
Well, we
short.
knew. I meant as like quickly as it did. In less than 2 years, we've been able to create a community and an ecosystem, and also very proud of this. We're on the road to reach $1 million raised. So very exciting about that in less than 2 years. Anyone who knows anything about startups and such knows that that's like a really big deal. And that's something that I don't think we've talked a whole lot about, but it's out there, you can go look up any of that information, but wanted to see how proud we are of that. And our average donation is $13.85, I believe, since I looked yesterday. So we're very thankful for everyone who has donated $1 all the way up to, I think our largest donation has been $500, $1,000. I don't remember. $5,000. There we go.
Everything thank you so much to our
everything in
largest
between
supporters, especially.
We're so appreciative of all of that. I wanted to make sure we said that because every person matters, every donation matters, every comment you send us matters, every email you send us matters. And thanks to all the people who've been chatting with us in the Discord. We're trying to get that more up and running. And it's funny, with as much as Jordan and I text each other, you'd think that we'd have no problem keeping up a text chat with 1,000 people, but it's hard to keep up a text chat with 1,000 people. Fun fact.
Yeah, we'll get there, and we would love your participation there too. So join the Discord if you haven't already. You will get the link anytime you donate, and we'll send a link around to previous donors at some point to make sure you have it. But I also want to take this moment to let you all know what we've done with that almost $1 million we've raised, because you deserve to hear directly from us what we're doing with the money. That's what makes us different. We're literally building the platform that allows us to tell you that. And for full details on everything we've done, go to our About Us page on our website. We've got a full breakdown of our story, our background, and the impact we've had on the Democratic Party and our goals for the future, now that we've built up the nation's largest focus group of Democratic donors and gotten a real pulse on how Democrats feel about what's going on, from the frustration with the scare tactics and the lies and the scams that are all too common in all of our inboxes, to the way that many people feel that our Democratic leaders have been out of touch. It's been really empowering and humbling at the same time to have that direct connection with the grassroots Democrats who make all of our campaigns run.
I want to remind you guys too that this started because Jordan is more from the digital world. I'm more from the field world. And this started because they don't speak to each other. And so,
No.
the consultants on half the side of the campaign don't speak to a lot of the campaign staff. And so consultants are saying, this is what I think that voters actually care about. And I'm the person who's saying, no, I'm talking to the voters every day. And that's actually not their number one issue. And we realized there was a disconnect and we need to fix that. And so that's where all of this started. And I hope you guys can see that we've taken all of your comments and concerns into consideration and have tried to uplift your voices through all the technology that we've built. Everything that you see from us has been built from scratch, produced from scratch, edited from scratch, almost entirely from Jordan. I want to make that like want to make sure that's
Don't
very
sell
clear. I
yourself
tell
short. You're the one reading all the comments.
That's true. That's true. I read all the comments, but then I say, I want this to happen. I don't know how to do it. And Jordan goes, I'm going to figure out how to do it. And so that's where all of your donations are going to is to build the ship as we're flying it. And we appreciate every single one of your suggestions you have. We've had software engineers reach out to us and say, hey, I've got these suggestions. And we've taken a lot of those suggestions because we're just two people. We don't know everything. And we appreciate everybody's comments.
Yeah, if you know how to code and you see something wrong with our code, please tell me in the most technical terms possible. It will help me. I want to know. It will make our stuff better. Like,
It's
we
not
want to
rude. We
hear.
we want we wanna hear it. If you're like, "This is wrong. This is how you fix it," please tell us. We welcome that information. We want criticism, and we mean
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And with that, we want to address one topic that has been coming up in supporter comments. I would say, interestingly, I'd say about 0.5% to 1% of all free response supporter comments, so where people can enter in their own responses, have been asking about the Democratic Party's support for Israel and the ongoing conflict in the Middle East and everything that's happened since October 7th and the horrific crimes that the Israeli government has committed in some cases in their quest to avenge and defend themselves from, I mean, the worst terror attack in their history. Point being, there's so much to unpack here. And as an organization founded to solve local level issues for Democrats running for state office, we felt that it was outside of our domain. We're not experts on the issue. And I mean, quite frankly, the only connection we have to it is that we're both Jewish.
Yeah,
And
this is something that we know is very important to talk about too, and I don't want it to sound like we've been putting it off, because we don't want to talk about it. Not true at all. It's more so we wanted to make sure that we were talking about it in the right way and that what we were going to say was going to be impactful. 'Cause I mean, that's the point of our little podcast here is that we want to eventually, hopefully influence and inform and this conflict that's happening between Gaza and Israel and the West Bank and Palestine and everything is very, very complex and very nuanced. And that's something that the nuance has been missing in a lot of conversations. And to be quite frank, it's also Jordan and I have been nervous about safety, about speaking about
yes,
this because of the nuance in this issue. And we want to take the time to talk about that, especially today's the first day of Passover. This evening, the first night of Passover. By the time you see this Passover, the first two nights will be done. But we thought that it
happy
was,
Passover to
yes,
everyone celebrating, and happy Easter as well to everyone celebrating that.
yeah, so this episode will come out sometime this weekend between both of the holidays. But we thought it would be really powerful to speak about this on the holiday, as I think it's quite fitting in many ways. And we're gonna get into it and talk about it more in just a second. But we wanted to make sure that we let you know that we see all of your comments, but we wanted to make sure we did this in the right way because this is such a hot button issue and it's a very important issue to a lot of people right now, as we can see. And yeah, we just want to make sure that we're doing it right and we are putting out there what we believe in the right way to make sure that we're not hurting anybody. I think you can agree, Jordan, that we want to make sure that
Yeah.
we don't get hurt in this process. We also want to make sure we don't hurt other people because right now in this issue it feels like everyone only has one side, and that's the side they're sticking to, possibly for
Mhm.
good reason, possibly because they don't have enough information to talk about another side. Because a lot of this issue's been influenced by the media, and we just wanted to make sure that we were doing this right.
And social media and the polarization that comes with that. But one other thing I want to say on that is that we also waited until we had enough supporter comments to the point where we could really build a complete picture of the consensus and how people feel. Because again, our role is not to preach at you all about how we feel. Our role is to, as organizers, listen, take in the comments of the people we listen to, the people we talk to every day, and synthesize that into a format that hopefully can break through the noise and become a real mouthpiece. And I did an analysis in preparation for this episode of all of the supporter comments going back to the beginning about Israel, about Palestine, about AIPAC, about anti-Semitism. I picked the key words, did some raw analysis before reading into the comments. Again, we found about 0.5 to 1% of all of our comments on completely unrelated topics take it back to Israel, whether or not it's Israel's the reason for the Democratic Party losing or genuine good faith concerns with the way Israel's handling its response to October 7th, its treatment of the Palestinians, how it handles its defense in general. And then I do just have to say, because this will be part of this episode, and I don't want it to minimize the suffering happening on the ground, but a couple of our responses were straight up anti-Semitic. And I want to call that out, that even though we value people's voices and we want to hear your thoughts, there's no place here for anti-Semitism. And I mean, somebody straight up said Hamas didn't exist and that they were a ploy by Israel to kill all the Palestinians, which just isn't true. I mean, this
That's just a
Jewish,
crazy conspiracy
yeah,
theory. Like,
this necklace I wear is made from a rocket shot into Israel by Hamas. And I mean,
yeah,
we just,
we see your comments and want to make sure that we are able to uplift your voices, but we don't uplift racism. We are certainly not going to uplift anti-Semitism. And we appreciate your comments, your concerns, your criticisms. That's what we want. But they can't be racist. They can't be anti-Semitic. They can't be Islamophobic. They can't be xenophobic. We don't want any of those.
yeah.
Those
And
are comments that we will not uplift. We will call out. And I don't know. I guess I think that's a good place to, I guess, go into everything we wanted to talk about.
yeah, no, because I mean, just as much as we're going to call out the anti Semitism, we're also, as Jews, going to call out our own side when we go too far. And I mean, just as much as I hate the anti Semitism on the left, I am sick and tired of the way that Jewish people have kind of kissed Donald Trump's ring for all of the shiny toys he's handing Israel at the consequence of our long term safety and security for short term wins, now getting us into a massive conflict. I mean, to the point where we've got all out war going on. I don't think anyone wants that.
From the president who said no more wars. And
Right.
it's become not just between Israel and Palestine, but now Lebanon is involved and Iran. It's everything. It's everybody.
I
It's
mean, to
all
be
in.
fair, the Iranians were always involved because Hamas and Hezbollah are Iranian proxies. And
They're all connected, but now
yeah,
now we're directly fighting with each of those countries and their terrorist organizations, not just through Hamas.
yeah. And the bigger problem, though, is that the Israelis seem to be making all the same mistakes the Americans made after 9/11. Okay, I know you saw that. You were telling me about that death penalty law they just passed, which actually, even my relatively pro Israel family was talking about how this has gone too far.
Yeah. So this is I want to make very clear, I'm not a legal expert, I'm not a legal scholar, but I enjoy looking through and reading laws and such. And I read through the law myself, and I read through analysis from multiple American legal scholars and Israeli legal scholars. If you didn't see, because the news cycle is just overlaps of all these awful, horrible things, the Israeli parliament passed a death penalty law that anybody who makes any vicious acts against Israel and for in the name of getting rid of the state of Israel could be subject to the death penalty. And that's what the law is in very plain basic text. But this law was written in a very specific and particular way that makes it so that essentially only Palestinians are going to be subject to this law. And a lot of the times when there are headlines that come out about laws that were passed in Israel, they're incredibly inflammatory and they're usually not true. This one is very true. I want to make that very clear that this headline that you are seeing, that Israel passed a death penalty for Palestinians who say that they are doing any sort of acts for the sake of trying to destroy Israel's state, they're going to be subject to the death penalty. And this law coincides with a few other laws that they have passed kind of quietly and or a very long time ago, where Palestinians can be imprisoned in the state of Israel for almost no reason. And so this leads us back to there are about, as of right now, estimated about 90,000 Palestinians who are imprisoned in the state of Israel, half of them for almost no reason. And the reason that the government of Israel has pretty much said that they're going to attach is that these people wanted to, you know, commit these acts against the Israeli people and the Jewish people in the name of getting rid of the state of Israel. And so there's probably going to be about 90,000 Palestinians who are going to be possibly subject to the death penalty. I want to make this is a very, very disgusting law.
Oh, yeah. If
And
yeah.
it makes me, I physically feel like everything's really tight inside of me talking about this, partially because like I want to, I want to make this very clear. I support Palestinian people. I support the Israeli people. I do not support the Palestinian government. I do not support Hamas. I do not support the Israeli government. And what the governments were doing in World War II to only subject gay people, Romani people, and Jewish people to go to camps, the Israeli government is attempting to do right now.
I mean, just like the US
And it's
government
horrible.
did in the 1940s, and by the way, again,
And just
with
like China's
it's,
doing to the Uyghurs,
yeah,
it's
it's
horrible.
giving Guantanamo Bay, by the way. It's giving
Yeah.
Guantanamo Bay is what I'm kind of feeling about it, and we can have that conversation. I did see, though, and I don't know if in any of the legal analysis you read, I saw someone point out that apparently the law was written in a way that it might get struck down by the high court, and that essentially it was a red herring to stop. And not that I'm justifying it, but I think we do, at least if we're going to come so hard at something, we should at least mention an argument I saw in favor of it was that they were trying to, and not saying I support this vision, but it is a legislative tactic by the Israeli far right to stop the hostage deals that have been being made, because the example they cite is Yahya Sinwar, who was the architect of October 7th, who was released from an Israeli prison in a previous hostage deal back, like, I think it was 10 years ago. So again,
So
not to defend, but just to provide the nuance and the other
yeah,
side.
yeah, yes and no. The problem though is I don't remember if you remember a few years ago when basic law was going through Israel. And if you go read about basic law, it's very complicated and you read it, it honestly sounds like AI slop. Not all of basic law passed, but parts of basic law passed in Israel. And the overall goal of getting all of basic law passed was basically to make the court system moot, and that a simple majority by parliament or by judges, that was the end all be all. It could not be brought back up again. So the point about the high courts rejecting it, that's not going to happen because they've already built the system so that the courts can't do that. And also I want to make it clear too, this law was passed like I think it was like 62 to 47 in parliament or something. So that's not a small margin. This won by a decent margin, and is the Israeli government. Very quick story on how parliament works. You vote for people to be in different parties, and all the parties come together to create coalitions to vote for a prime minister. So the groups get smaller and smaller, and they make coalitions to pick a prime minister. Right now, the Israeli far right has a very large influence over parliament, which is by Bibi Netanyahu keeps getting reelected over and over again, even though he's like being charged with all sorts of fraud and stuff. And, that's it's a conversation for another time. Again, we we both do not like Bibi, but the far right and Bibi Netanyahu have a very large influence on what's going on right now. And that's why we're seeing all these things go through. But long story short, this law is disgusting. It goes against everything that we as Jews should believe. When we said, never again for our own people, I think that also carries over to every other minority and group of people out there. In Judaism, one of the special things about it is that Judaism is more about the morals and the ethics that you learn through the stories in the Torah or, the Bible or the Quran, the further up you go through religion. And it's you don't have to be religious to be Jewish, which is a very unique part of it. It's about the morals and the ethics. And I feel like the Israeli government who is claiming, we're doing this because we want a Jewish state, these are not the values of Judaism. This is not what Judaism is about. And the fact they pass this right before Passover, which, if you don't remember, is about us, having to leave Egypt because otherwise we were going to be killed and enslaved. I don't know. It's very eerie right now. You guys can connect the dots there. I don't think I need to explain all of that. But this goes against every value, as at least for myself as a Jew, and I think for most Jews, most American Jews.
Yeah, and I wish we could have that conversation because I mean, you and I have been having this conversation, but that's not the conversation that's being had on social media. It's not the conversation that's being had in the news. And I mean, I wish, like, look at AOC, for example, whose response to this is like, I'm not going to vote to fund so-called defensive aid to Israel, and I'm not gonna agree with the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which, back to the so-called defensive aid, just to be very clear about what we're talking about Iron Dome, which is the missile defense system that stops these rockets from being fired into Israel on civilian populations. And
In very simple terms, the Iron Dome spots missiles in the air and explodes them in the air, and that's all it does. Like, it does not shoot missiles at people. It does not fire artillery at civilians or populations. It stops missiles in the air that are coming into Israel and sometimes into the West Bank and sometimes into Gaza. That is
yeah,
what the Iron Dome does. I want to make that super clear. That is all it does. It does not shoot things to kill people. It stops missiles from killing people.
Yeah, and let's be clear, anyone who thinks that the solution to what Israel is doing wrong is to defund Iron Dome is expressly advocating for Jews in Israel to die as a result of the actions of their government. That is the same kind of genocide that you claim to be against.
It's also not just Jews that live in Israel. I think people forget that there are so many people. Israel is one of the oldest places on earth.
Oh,
It has so
absolutely.
many
It's
different
just
groups of people there. And I don't want to get into the semantics of who lives there and what rights they have there, because that's not this part of the conversation that we're having. But it's not just Jews in Israel that live there. It's Arabs, it's Palestinians, it's Christians, it's Armenians. There's so many groups of people who live there that would die if those missiles got into Israel. And also, I just want to make this point. If you think everything that Israel is doing is bad right now, which it is, it would be so much worse if they did not have a missile defense system. If you think they're going berserk now, yeah,
they would carpet bomb every rocket launcher, regardless of how many schools were built on top of it.
it's already bad. It would be so much worse. If we're already at a 10, if you think we're at a 10 now in terms of how bad things are, there was no Iron Dome, that 10 would actually be a 1. Like,
Yeah,
being super, super honest about that.
yeah,
It's and
and
I'm laughing not because it's funny. I'm laughing because I know that you, Jordan, and I know, and I know that some people will understand, like, how scary that statement is. And I'm laughing because I'm nervous saying that because I know it's true.
I'm laughing because if you've ever met an Israeli, you know it's true.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say about Israeli mentality is that when you've had 3 generations of living under constant bombardment because your neighbors don't want you to exist, you develop a certain hardened sense of protectionism. And I mean, it's led to a lot of bad, but at the same time, I truly believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but part of the reason Israel has gone so berserk over the last couple of years is because, as far as the extreme anti-Zionists are concerned, the genocide started on October 8th.
Yeah, and here's the thing here, guys. If we want to talk about the systematic killing of Palestinians, it did not start October 8th. It started how many decades before? Like, it has been going on for longer than you would ever think. And one of the thing, this is
I
a
wouldn't
part of the
call it systematic killing, though. I would call it, because if you look at the population graphs, the populations have increased. Oppression, yes. Occupation, absolutely. Forced displacement, war crimes, name any number of them. And this is where the genuine criticism gets mixed in with the anti-Semitism. Genocide is a very specific charge that is very specifically, I mean, the word was created to define the Holocaust because they needed a word for how bad the systemic deportation of Jewish people, including my great-grandfather and his family, to concentration camps. It's like Israel's doing any number of things. It's not that. And I hate to say it's like not to defend what they are doing, but just to think about it from the mentality of an Israeli. If for everything else you're doing, you're going to be accused of genocide and you're still being bombed and rocketed all the time, why not just go all the way?
Also want to point out that all of these are some of the nuances that I mentioned at the very beginning that we have talked about. Also, I want to mention too that Benjamin Netanyahu was born in America,
Oh, yeah,
and
he
he moved
gets
to
all
Israel,
his
and he's the
cred.
prime minister, and he and Donald Trump are they're besties. But this Israeli mentality, and also at this point, I don't want to call it American mentality, but this like MAGA American mentality that they can do whatever they want and get away with it. That's where a lot of this is coming from, and that's another nuance that has been missing
Hmm.
from a lot of this conversation that I think
Yeah,
is
the
more
fact
important than people think.
Yes, the fact that this is one of many direct consequences of Donald Trump disrupting every
And
norm
yes,
in
direct.
global
I wanna
society.
underline that, direct. It's a direct
Direct,
consequence of Donald Trump.
yes. And there are so many of them. But I think something else to point out too, and to really get into the meat of it, the way that AIPAC has been outsized as the cause of these problems. When I would say that, I mean, what's happened to AIPAC is another direct consequence of Donald Trump. And I mean, Trump is the center sphere here, not AIPAC. And I worry that, I mean, AIPAC deserves plenty of criticism for the turns it's taken in the last couple years, but it has become this kind of catch-all name for everything wrong that is Jewish, both on the far left and the far right, in a way that, I mean, it's getting really anti-Semitic, and it's a problem. And I mean, just for some transparency here, I think it's time to get into part of our origin story that we left out because it, again, wasn't important.
It's important now.
It's important now, but wasn't important to the mission we set out to accomplish and would only distract. But it's important is that
And one of our big things is transparency.
mhm,
And we wanna be transparent with you guys about exactly where we met and I guess where we stand now.
yeah. Yeah, so we met on an AIPAC sponsored trip to Israel that they took about 30 college students who they had identified as potential future leaders in politics. I mean, very flattered that they thought that of me in college. And I mean, we're doing what we're doing now, so maybe they were right. But they took, I think, what, 30 of us to Israel, and they had really kind of peeled back the curtain. We met with, over 5 days, some pretty high up leaders and influential people within all sides of the Israeli-Palestinian
In the
conflict. And
Palestinian Authority and in the Israeli
yeah,
parliament. We met people
yeah.
on both sides.
Yeah, no, and we got to ask them whatever questions we wanted. I think I was particularly known on that trip for picking their brains and finding every logic hole in everything everyone was saying, because over, I think, a 3-hour conversation you and I had when we had just met in a hotel lobby in Jerusalem, we were just talking about how literally everyone we spoke to was wrong.
Yeah, and also a little more context, this trip we went on was in the very beginning of January 2020. So we
Yes.
were we were there when COVID was tearing through China and Iran, and we were also there when the US killed Soleimani. That was a fun part of that trip. There were lots of other fun things happening on the trip.
Didn't our bus get stuck in the rain on the Israeli-Lebanese border?
Yeah, that happened. That one too was a crazy trip.
Yeah, right
But
after the IDF general got done telling us about how Hezbollah had rockets pointed at us from that hill. And I mean, I will say I remember when Israel began their incursion into Lebanon a little bit ago, I saw the picture of the hill they destroyed, and it was the hill we had seen.
yeah, it's I know it's eerie to think about all of
It's
that.
scary.
But we were woken up in the middle of the night when Soleimani had been killed by U.S. forces, and to let us let our parents know and such. And we're all sitting in the lobby. They all kind of wanted us to be there just so they could keep track of us, and because we were on a trip to Israel with a highly politicized American Israel group, and that was when Jordan and we had talked a little bit before on the trip, and this was like a 5-day trip. This is what halfway through the
5
trip.
days.
Five,
Was we were I think we were about 3 or 4 days in, because it was
yeah.
after we had done, and right after this, we're going to get into our day in the West Bank. But
Yeah. We had met and we were talking about how we were like, nobody gets every part of this. And here's the funny thing too. Everyone else was probably sitting there thinking that everyone else was wrong too. Because that's how the conversations go with this conflict. But something I think that one of the things that Jordan and I talked about was I think we both kind of had the unique perspective. We were able to kind of view this a little outside of everybody else and view all aspects of what was going on. So, like, there were less than half the people on the trip were Jewish, from what I remember, and which I thought
yeah, it was
was
about half.
a little odd. But, anyways, and we were some of the only people who I think were also at the time like half religious, half like what's the word I'm looking for?
Secular.
Yeah, yeah. So we were viewing
Yeah.
this, I think, from a little bit of a different lens than a lot of people, but we realized that everyone was missing the nuance in things. And I didn't ask as many questions on the trip that I wish I would have at this point. I was more sitting and listening just because there was so much information we were getting from so many interesting people. And I just wanted to sit and listen. I was like, there's enough other people like Jordan asking questions that I can just sit and listen and such. But this trip was incredibly eye-opening for so many reasons, and it's where Jordan and I met. After that, COVID, totally hit the United States, and we never saw each other again for what, 4 years, but we kept in
Yeah,
touch,
but we
and
kept
we
in
built and
touch.
launched this organization, we hadn't seen each other in 4 years. It
Oh my
was very
God. Yeah,
funny the first time we saw each other after 4 years. We were like, "Whoa."
yeah, no, but I mean, as much as on that trip we discovered everyone was wrong, we went off into our careers, you knocking doors, me ending up in a cesspool. We stayed in touch about what was wrong, and I don't think we ever really stopped having that conversation we started in that hotel lobby in Jerusalem. And
We're still
quite
having that
frankly, yeah.
conversation 6 years later, so
And now you all get to be a part of it. And
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think I can speak for both of us saying that that was I'm going to call that a career defining moment or at least a
yeah,
career pivoting moment for both of us. Um
yes.
and I guess I never realized how important that conversation was going to be and where exactly it would lead, but here we are today.
Yeah, no, and I mean, for all of why we got into APAC and what it used to be,
And why we
like
don't really support
that's
it anymore.
yeah, no, but I mean, that for me, it was at least about those connections. And I mean,
AIPAC was also an entirely different organization from like 2017 to like the middle of 2020. And then they had a very large shift after January 6th, 2021. You can put the dots together. And the shift has just continued to go further in the wrong direction. But when I got involved with AIPAC, they were sane, like to put it like quite plainly.
mhm.
And they were working on trying to, connect more with people that like weren't just moderate Democrats and very moderate centrist Republicans. And then it just totally went a completely different direction after January
Oh,
6th, 2021.
by the way, it wasn't January 6th. January 6th was the point of no return. It was the like true tipping point, but the poison started seeping into APAC. I truly believe, and I mean, from what I've heard through the grapevine, I was also a lot more involved than you were.
Yeah. I was very cautious.
No, I was, full disclosure, the president of my college APAC chapter. And quite frankly, the reason I got into it was because I was so sick of the anti Semitism on the left that it drew me to APAC. And then
That's
I
why I
went to
got involved
these
too.
Yeah, and then I went to these conferences where I met I mean, at the time, APAC Policy Conference, for anyone who ever went or knows anything about it, they put 18,000 people of all political leanings in a room together and just you would just have at it. And, I mean, you had these defining conversations where people disagreed, and that was part of it. And, I mean, COVID killed that, but what really killed it was they had since they had been started, a long-standing mission statement that they were committed to bipartisanship and the shared values of democracy that built the foundation between the US-Israel relationship. That was, and I say that verbatim because I was doing campus recruiting, so I'm literally repeating old talking
It's it's
points.
it's drilled in there.
It's yeah, and none of it feels true anymore. And it really all I hate to say, and from everything I understand, I blame Trump for poisoning it like he poisoned every other bipartisan thing in this country when he spoke at policy conference in 2016, which was before either of us ever went. But the only reason I know about it is because when I was there years after, I heard people saying, like murmuring in the crowd, I want more of what Trump was saying last year when he was the only one to attack the other party from the AIPAC stage, which was not something people did at the AIPAC of old.
Yeah.
And
It's
now they're
when
fighting with people on Twitter.
yeah. Yep. But no, I think long story short to say that we've not been involved with APAC for multiple years at this point, and I also from like a campaign level, I am deeply unsupportive of everything that they did in Chicago with their dark money packs and spending I think it was $15 million against more progressive candidates who not every progressive candidate that ran was anti-Israel. For example, like Juliana Stratton. Juliana Stratton is a pro-Israel candidate, but she's anti-APAC. And APAC spent, I don't remember how many millions of dollars I got like, I don't remember how many it was. I think it was, I got like 8 or 9 mailers that were anti-Juliana Stratton who ran for Senate in Illinois, saying that she was not progressive. And I was like, you kidding me? Anyways, very niche content there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
APAC almost had it right. They did. They were really trying, and I think people forgot what bipartisan was supposed to mean, partially because of Donald Trump and the way that things have become so polarizing and split. But I still live by the fact that I believe very strongly in bipartisanship. We're not going to get there right now. There is no bipartisanship right now. Although I hope I don't regret saying this. Shout out to Thomas Massey for trying to be bipartisan in a lot of things right now. He's truly pushing for that right now. Um, no other Republican is, but that's what bipartisanship is supposed to be, and that's what APAC was supposed to be about. And they lost the
Yeah.
plot.
And
We've lost the plot,
I
chat.
know. And they also, I mean, they seemed so committed to the nuance that we're talking about too, and they've kind of abdicated that post. I mean, I remember going back to our trip. I want to give you a bit of a rundown of our day in the West Bank before we discuss the criticism of AIPAC and zoom out to the anti-Semitism a little bit, just so you have an understanding of the perspective we had from some real on the ground experience. We had a fascinating time where we got to see both an Israeli settlement and we went into Jericho, into the heart of true Palestinian territory where, by the way, Israelis are not even allowed to go. By Israeli law, it is illegal to go there because they don't want Israelis picking fights in those areas. And I'll show you the giant sign. We literally had to kick our Israeli security guard off the bus and bring on a hired Palestinian security guard. And
The settlement we were in, by the way, was Mitzpe Yericho. For people
okay,
wondering, I think that's important to be, I don't know, transparent about that too. It's
yeah,
Mitzpe Yericho. But
yeah.
anyways,
So, but yeah, when we visited the settlement, we met with, I mean, the guy we met, first of all, he wasn't Israeli. He was from Brooklyn. And then he had moved to Palm Beach, Florida, before he realized he could get a really nice chunk of land and a cheap house for his 7 kids in the West Bank and followed his Zionist obligation to move there. If you can tell how I feel about Israeli settlements in the West Bank, by the way.
it was a very interesting conversation that we had with him. If he's watching
The
this, he
fact that
knows who
he
he
lived
is.
in
But
Palm Beach, I think the fact that he lived in Palm Beach tells you everything you need to know. Like,
I'm still friends with him on Facebook just to read all the whack ass shit he says. Anyways,
yeah, but then to flip to the other side, we went into Jericho, ditched our Israeli security guard. We're told to hide all signs of Judaism before holing up in a hotel in Jericho where we met with a Palestinian media consultant who worked for the PA. And just for some context, I'm going to show you all on the screen a picture of some of the not just abject poverty, but income inequality we saw within Jericho. And I'm not talking about between Israelis and Palestinians. I'm talking about within proper Palestine, within their cities, there are gated mansions surrounded by rubble and trash. And
it's it's one of the it's one of the hardest things I think I've ever seen. It
yes,
was this Jericho, by the way, is supposedly like the oldest city in the world. Trashed.
Yes.
Completely trashed.
And
It was
I mean,
horrible. Dead
I
animals
made
everywhere, garbage bags everywhere, like, I
yeah, and
remember the pictures, like, you don't even need to remind me, I remember what they looked like, it's etched into my memory. It was one of the hardest things I've ever looked at in my life, honestly.
yeah, and then when we got into this hotel, which was clearly the nicest building in a half-mile radius that nobody ever stayed at,
Yeah.
we met with this Palestinian media consultant, and, I mean, he did a Q&A with us, so,
The room was also
s
filled with other Palestinian soldiers with guns that were taller and way more than I do. I wanna also set the scene there. They're giant Uzis, and you know what that is, but I wanted to make sure that was very clear.
okay, given that, I still can't believe I did what I did, which I'll get
I
into,
know.
but
I didn't say a single word in that room. I was so scared. I'm gonna be so honest.
I think I was so tired that I kinda forgot where I was and just went for it, but anyway, somebody else in the room asked him about the Martyr Fund, which if you don't know, the Palestinian Authority has a longstanding policy of paying pensions to the families of Palestinian terrorists who either die or are imprisoned perpetrating acts of terrorism against Israel. So, I mean, as bad as the Israeli death penalty law is, I think we can agree that this martyr fund
Being
system is,
encouraged.
yeah, they're literally encouraging terrorism. And for anyone who says we shouldn't recognize the state of Palestine, I say recognize them as a state so we can put them on the top of our list of state sponsors of terrorism. Just putting that out there. But
Hamas is a terrorist group, by the way. I want to make sure we put that out there. And then the Palestinian Authority,
is
yeah,
a shell company for Hamas at this point. But
yeah. Want to make
either
that
way,
very clear. That's where we stand there.
yeah, either way, somebody asked this guy, like, how do you justify paying terrorists when you are also engaged in dialogue and peace? And he said basically the argument he made, which is, I mean, sleazy spin, but I'll give him credit for it being not half bad spin, was he said that Palestine is a very patriarchal society with very large families, and entire families can be dependent on one male figure. So when that one male figure is removed from a household, you have to institute a social welfare program to deal with that problem. Those were his words. That was his defense of the Martyr Fund. So then I raised my hand and said, follow up, just out of curiosity. You say, as you just did, that the Palestinian Authority is committed to the social welfare of its citizens. I'll say, and just in my own eyes, I saw some of the most abject poverty I've ever seen on the way in here. What is the Palestinian Authority doing to address that? And he said, Israel takes this away, Israel takes that away, blah, blah, blah. We can't Israel this, Israel that. And it's like, clearly some people get money and have mansions, and it's all being reserved for the people who go kill Jews.
Yeah. Well, I want to make it clear too, Israel does limit like things that go in and out and funds and such, but then the Palestinian Authority, the government body there, is limiting it even further for the people who live there. I want to make that
And
super clear that he's only telling half of the story.
yeah, and directing it all to terrorism. And then you have a chicken and the egg problem, which is Israel denying aid to the Palestinians, or are the Palestinians taking aid and diverting it to terrorism? And you
The
have,
answer is
it's a
both.
both
The
and
answer is both.
situation.
It's a vicious
Absolutely.
cycle. It's a vicious
It's
cycle that keeps going through, and both sides can keep using that to blame each other for all the things that keep happening.
Yeah, no, it's a vicious cycle, but it's also, I mean, unfortunately, I'll just say, one of God knows how many global conflicts there are where people are being hurt, killed, there are active genocides going on in the world, and somehow this issue has become the center of everything that has been the wedge dividing the Democratic Party and the reason Kamala Harris lost in some cases. And you've got AIPAC, which is, I mean, one of the larger Jewish lobbying groups in the United States, but a pretty mid-sized lobbying group compared to the billions of dollars that AI companies are pouring into American politics, not to mention oil barons. And I mean, take Tom Steyer, who's yelling at AIPAC, when he has single-handedly put more money into the political ecosystem of his own money than AIPAC has. We are just reeking tropes of the Jews control the money here. Like, if you want to criticize AIPAC, take a look at the last 20 minutes of our conversation about all of the very real ways you can call AIPAC out for the hypocrisy and the way they've been operating. But don't you dare use what AIPAC's doing to inject anti-Semitism into the progressive movement, because quite frankly, when we say in response to all of this shit that it's okay to say globalize the Intifada, then the family member of a suspected Hezbollah terrorist who was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon decides it's okay to take revenge on that by getting a bunch of explosives and guns and driving his car into the preschool at Temple, Israel in Michigan. Congratulations, you've globalized the Intifada.
Criticism is not space for racism. I said at the very beginning, criticism is not space for anti-Semitism. Criticism is not space for Islamophobia. It's, I feel like, way easier to be critical of something and not be racist. You have to think about how to be racist and how to be anti-Semitic. Well, with anti-Semitism, it's been so ingrained into society.
It also does really well on social media.
Yeah, it does very well on social media, but there's so many things that you've heard or like phrases and such that you didn't realize were racist, like peanut gallery, low-hanging fruit. Those are incredibly racist to the Black community. But there's things like, oh, like, well, Israel's doing this, and then when you ask, oh, well, what part of Israel are you blaming? Are you blaming the whole country? No, the people who live there. It's like, okay, well, I know where this is the rabbit hole's going down. It's going to, Jews. But when people blame America for things, they immediately go Donald Trump and the government. That's what we're talking about here, about how anti-Semitism has been so deeply ingrained into society, and okay, people say it shouldn't be. We call out every other type of bigotry and racism so much, but not anti-Semitism. And the only time that we see, I'm going to call out super far left influencers for this, talking about anti-Semitism is when it's popular and everyone else says something, like the attack in Michigan.
Or when the far right's doing it.
When the far right is doing it. After the attack in Michigan, that is the first time that I saw several people I personally know too, and I was very disappointed by it, and I called them out for it, say anything about how anti-Semitism was wrong. But throughout the entire, election cycles that have happened over and over again, and I hear them say, free Palestine, fuck Israel, globalize the Intifada. I'm like, do you realize that, like, half of the things that you said are inherently anti-Semitic, and the other things that you were saying are, like, they're not anti-Semitic, but if I were to ask you the deeper meaning of it, it would lead to anti-Semitism, how harmful that is. And then I've talked about intersectionality in progressivism a lot. I'm not going to get into that again right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's trendy to say globalize the Intifada.
Yeah.
Come
No,
on,
it's
guys,
also, I mean,
what's going on here?
yeah, also just look at the way that Israel has dominated every progressive space. Like, look at the climate movement, I think is the best example, because essentially anti-Israel talking points at their core come from Iranian propaganda farms. So essentially Middle Eastern oil barons. And we have now got the climate movement in the United States abandoning its post on climate to echo the talking points of oil barons against the one country in the Middle East that invests in clean energy. And just put aside the morality of the conflict for a second, just look at the absurdity of how anti-Semitism has poisoned the climate movement. And I really want to leave this off with a personal anecdote that speaks to, I think, my rage and fury and steadfastness in this issue. So as I mentioned, my great-grandfather was an Auschwitz survivor. I saw the tattoo on his arm when I was a kid. What I didn't mention was his name, Kurt Frankfurter. And if the name Frankfurter rings a bell, it's because he was actually first cousins once removed from a U.S. Supreme Court justice who was an advisor to Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s. And shortly before the war, my great-great-grandfather wrote to his cousin Felix, who was an advisor to the President of the United States, saying they were concerned about the anti-Semitism in Europe and that they wanted to come to the United States, and they asked him to sponsor their family of 11. And he wrote back that based on the intelligence he was seeing in the White House, there was not a severe threat to the Jews in Europe, that the reports of anti-Semitism, while showing up occasionally, that they were overblown, and that Hitler really wasn't going as far as they were rumored. My great-grandfather was the only one of that family to survive, and I think the numbers tattooed on his arms say that Felix Frankfurter was very wrong. And keep in mind, by this point, Felix Frankfurter had already helped found the ACLU, and he went on to be a Supreme Court justice while making sure to echo the president's party line about the Holocaust not being that bad so clearly that he even denied his own family. And I mean, I don't know if you remember that in 1939, Charlie Chaplin was making jokes in a movie called The Great Dictator about the Nazis using poison gas to kill Jews. Roosevelt was denying that was happening. Felix Frankfurter himself, actually, in 1943, said he didn't believe the reports he was hearing from a Polish resistance fighter. And this was after the U.S. had gone into the war because of Pearl Harbor. So, especially in a progressive movement that seems to idolize FDR and wants our next FDR, Green New Deal, and all that, I am not going to be quiet about making sure that there is space for Jews and to combat anti-Semitism in the future of our Democratic Party.
That's a crazy story. The sad part about your story too is that literally every other Jewish person has a story just
Yeah,
like that.
it's
And
not remarkable.
that's not me saying that to one up people or to one up you.
No.
It's because it's true. The only reason that I'm alive today is because of Israel. My family they were in Poland when World War II was happening. They were put in Polish camps, and Israel was the place that provided a safe haven for them. And they went there before the state of Israel was declared, when it was deemed a safe space for people to go, during and after the war. I'm being vague with my story, because I know that not everyone wants their full story of how they ended up out of, the camps out there,
Mhm.
because it's very painful to tell. And I also, very honestly, I don't know the full story, because it's something that it's very painful for my family to talk about. But I don't know 75% of my family history, before like 1945, because of the Holocaust. That's like a very plain, simple fact. In elementary school, the times we had to do our family trees was not fun, 'cause my parents always had to come in and tell my teachers, Shayna can't give her story past 1945. And half my teachers would go, why? I mean, before
Seriously?
1945. Yeah, they would be like, "Why?" And it's like, "Let me give you a second to register what happened then." And then I went, "Oh my god, yeah, you're not gonna have your family history before that. Yeah." And, and then, they would try and push me to, like, ask my family about, what actually happened. I was like, "No, they told me that they're not comfortable sharing that, and I'm not going to force them to." I was forced to do this stuff when I was, like, in second or third grade. I was a little kid, and they were trying to force my family to talk about their stories that they heard or possibly heard or never heard from their parents who were in concentration camps. But I know that I don't have the full story, because some of my grandparents, I don't think they ever heard the full stories from their parents.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
the and parents before who did not survive. So, and I know that every other Jewish person watching this also has a story.
First of all, I can't believe that half your teachers didn't put two and two together, but that's, I mean, the privilege I had of going to a Jewish day school where we
I went to school in
were,
Iowa, so
yeah. No, they made sure. I mean, I went to Poland on a Jewish trip with thousands of Jewish teenagers and
that's something I
Holocaust
would love to do
survivors.
one day.
Yeah. I mean, it was hauntingly powerful, but I'm so glad I did it. And I mean, I was always taught that one day the Holocaust survivors are going to die and we're going to be the ones to carry on their stories. And I mean, I wrote a paper about my great grandfather. I watched an interview he taped in seventh grade shortly before he passed. And I actually went back and rewatched it and spoke with my grandma and obviously got the permission and the family details to share my family history on this podcast. And I just want to say thank you all to our supporters for sharing your thoughts, for listening to this incredibly deep conversation. And I think I want to wrap up with a clip from the interview that I think are words everybody needs to hear from somebody who survived this themselves.
Und dass heute Leute hier, die sagen, es ist nicht passiert. Never happened. Can you imagine?